want to allow all of you to just let him into your heart this morning before we sing this song and before Pastor Todd preaches to us. Standing here in your presence, in a grace so relentless, I am moved by perfect love. Wrapped within the arms of heaven, in a peace that lasts forever, sinking deep in
guys can be seated. Hey, I have a couple of very quick announcements for you, but I get to introduce you to two people in the process. And first, I want to invite up Letty. Would you, everybody give it up for Letty. You don't know her, but she works with the Hayes CISD PEP program. She's a graduate of T-State, just down the road. Go Bobcats. She is here to tell us about our Love Blitz. How many of you have participated in Love Blitz before? For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a flash mob style blessing that we just heave on somebody because we love them. And so we get a secret agent, a la Letty, and we get a person who we're choosing to bless. She's going to tell us about this wonderful young lady here in just a second. And then we get them to a location, time and place, and then we all show up, and we invite as many of our friends as we possibly can, and we get there, and then we wait outside, and then we ambush in flash mob style, throw a bucket down, and everybody says, "We love you." We drop in cash, gift cards, whatever we can to bless these people. And so would you tell us a little bit about what's going on?
So, like Pastor Todd said, thank you all for having me here today. I work for Texas State University, and so that is the outreach for all of the high schools here in Hayes County. And so I have a student, her name is Karina. I'm going to keep her last name private, but she is a special student of ours who is going through some troubled times right now. She's trying to become an independent adult on her own to provide for her and her daughter. This is her, and so she is an amazing young woman who I got to meet through our program called Strengthening Relationships, Strengthening Families. When I first met her, it's kind of like a young woman like having to peel an onion back because she had this nice, vibrant personality, but between all of that, you kind of saw that there was some turmoil there, but we wouldn't see it past her because she has a young daughter who she wants to be living her life for and who she wants to be doing good things for and support. So right now, she's currently trying to, like I said, become an independent youth on her own and an adult. And so to do that, she needs help and support by getting a driver's license, getting also, we're going to be helping her try and find a good car for her to drive. And also, I've been working very hard to try and get her a job and a decent place for her to be staying. And so with that said, like, she has perfect attendance through all of the turmoil in her life. She has great grades, and I was like, she's just an awesome mom who, like, through all of her struggles, has a vibrant smile every morning, and that the bus drops her off at 7 a.m. And goes to the PEP Center. She helps others whenever they have to go for breakfast. She picks up all the other moms' breakfast and then comes and brings it back to the PEP Center. And she offers to have like birthday parties for some of the other moms who can't afford it. What is the little that she does have. And so she's just an awesome, great around young adult who is trying to make the best life for her. Through our group, we have, like I said, strengthening relationships, strengthening families. We encourage our youth to use their words in a positive way and in a healthy way of expressing their problems and expressing their through their hardships, right? Because we don't want them to become violent in front of anyone or in front of their children or anything like that. And so she has used those words and used the tools that we have taught her in group to express how she's feeling. It's like peeling back that onion little by little, day by day. I was able to help her kind of, and it's a big task to want to ask for help, right? And so to getting her to do that and to see her growth from the year and a half that I've been here has been tremendous. And so with your help, I'm hoping through the Love Blitz that y'all can come and support a young lady who gives back to her teen moms and her peers because, like I said, she's just in a struggle right now, and so she really needs that help and encouragement. And so she's also said it. She's like when we've had our meetings, she's like, I just need something to uplift me because I know this is the time where I need help, and I'm not here reaching. So she does not know about the Love Blitz. The only thing that she knows is that we're going to be celebrating her and her daughter because they're awesome. And then she's also running for policy council, so we're going to be celebrating her policy council win. So with that, going to be doing that because we're like excited for her that she's won something in her life for the first time. So yeah, that's what the love, we're going to be taking her to Love Blitz to celebrate. So yes.
So if you didn't catch this, Karina is a high school student, single mom, perfect attendance, good grades, looking to become independent, has kept jobs in the past while doing all of those things, needing a healthy place to stay. And we're working on that. We're getting close to that. And part of getting emancipated is if you don't have your driver's license, it can't happen. And so we get the opportunity to bless her, and with the money, she's potentially going to use that to take a driver's license course so that she can work her way up as a mom. How cool is that? And so we talked about it's going to be this Wednesday evening, 6:30 at Ilario's. We're going to meet at the Starbucks, outside of the Starbucks, which is just on 1626 in front of HEB. There's an Ilario's Italian kitchen and a Starbucks there in a little outbuilding. That's where we're going to meet. So as a church, 6:30 at the Starbucks. That's where we're going to meet, and then we will do the Blitz after that. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah, absolutely. Bring it in. Everybody give it up for Miss Letty, who coordinated all this. Thank you so much. And thank you, Kimberly, for setting all that up. Second thing, I want to invite my really good friend, Ray, up here. Many of you know Pastor Sam Flores. He came and spoke to us a little while back, and he gave everybody jars, and he told a story from the Old Testament about the lady who had the oil in the jar. And he was instrumental in the group of pastors that really saw a vision for what Wayfinders could be and invited me to say yes to God's call to plant Wayfinders, because I was on the fence. And then Sam left, and he took a job in South Carolina. We're not going to hold it against him. He did something really good. He's leading about 100 church network there. But in stepped my good friend Ray. Everybody say hi, Ray.
Hi, Ray.
Ray, I have known since I was 12 years old. He was a pastor to my grandparents in Amarillo, been a pastor to me, been a pastor to Pastor Michael in San Marcos, in our San Marcos church, been a pastor to Sam, who was the instrumental bringers. And you were on the group of pastors that oversaw the decision to bring me here. And so, Ray, would you just bring us greetings from our Nazarene network and tell us a little bit about what you'd love to see for us?
Well, greetings indeed. It is a delight to be here. It's exciting to see what God's doing here in Kyle through you and through Todd and Holly, and we're just as excited as we could be. I feel a little bit like a proud dad, kind of, to see this happening and see familiar faces that I know and love, and very, very excited to get the privilege of being here and worship with you today. How many? 22. Mercy. What that means is I'm an old guy. So I've been around a little while, and am excited about the new opportunity to go around and represent a network of churches, 106 strong in South Texas. As my friend likes to say, today there are a group of churches that are part of your family that are worshiping today in English and in Spanish and in Korean and in South Texas. South Texan or something like that. Anyway, it's all kinds of languages and worship styles and all kinds of different places, but we're all one big family, and we're a family that is praying for you and is encouraging you and is excited about what God's doing here. I even caught it on Facebook that your pastor was nominated for Citizen of the Year or something like that. How about that? That's pretty cool. Which means you're making inroads and you're introducing yourself to this community, and you're offering the story that we're all living out to a community that's hungry for it. Again, we're here for you. We are grateful for the privilege of worshiping with you today and continuing to pray for you and to support you. We serve a God who is very, very busy and very, very strong and very, very capable of helping us in our everyday lives and helping us as a body of believers to make a difference in this world. Amen? Amen. Listen, when you listen to the news and you follow what's happening around the world, from stock market dips to political silliness to the crazy, there's one thing that we can continue to remember, and that is we have a great big God who hasn't missed a step. He hasn't fallen asleep. He hasn't been weakened. He isn't financially poor. He's able to meet our needs. And sometimes we lament about how life's going, but He's there for us, and I'm excited about what He's doing here.
Awesome. Can everybody give it up for Ray? If you get a chance to meet Pastor Ray later, you should shake his hand. He's a man of God. He is for you. He's someone who from time to time will step in to help me because we don't do anything alone. Now, he's in the midst of selling a house in Orange that was flooded up to the second story in last year's hurricanes and been restored. And we were able to be a part of his story because his church helped disseminate 2 truckloads of materials that this church sent down there. And so we're connected in so many ways, and that's what it's about being this body of churches working together to care for people because Christ has blessed us. Isn't that great? So with that, let's roll this tape. Back on? Okay, there we go. Cool. We just had a momentary lapse. We've been broaching a difficult subject with this series on lament. And so to make it a little bit more palatable, we decided last week to introduce a game show segment to our weekend worship experience. And that is, ready for it, Taylor Swift, lyric or Lamentations. There it is. Yes, Lamentations or Taylor Swift lyrics. Everybody give it up for the game show. And I brought up here Allison this week, who is competing. If she gets both questions right, you will get a Kind Bar because it is the healthier snack of choice by so many, and it's all I had to grab on the way out of the house. So with that in mind, you said you are an expert on all things T-Swizzle.
His name's Drew.
Okay. And so if there is someone who is a Taylor Swift expert, you would be it. And so, well, listen, you're here, so you take the spotlight. And I want everybody else to commit into this as well. We're going to vote. You're going to give me a final answer, and then we're going to do it. Does that sound good? All right, so put the first question up there. Here we go. My eyes are blind with tears. My stomach is in a knot. Is this a Taylor Swift lyric or a lamentation? Everybody, if you think this is a Taylor Swift lyric, hands up. Well, we got one. We got one. If you think this is a lamentation, that's most of the crowd. Our final answer.
I'm going to have to go with Lamentations.
And it is Lamentations 2:11. It was actually read earlier today by Ravens, who so poetically read chapter 2 of Lamentations. All right, next one. You're 1 for 1. One question away from the Kind Bar. Hit the next one. You're like a lion ready to pounce. Ooh. Who says this is a Taylor Swift lyric? Okay, all right. Who says this is a lamentation? Oh, it's split down the middle. It's a split. What is your final answer?
Okay, my final answer, because Raven went with it, I'm going to go with...
I don't have it with me. It's in my backpack. So we'll get it after the service. I want to recap with you guys. We started a series called Collapse last week. And it's dealing and broaching a difficult subject. How do we deal with loss? Where do we put our pain and despair and sadness and brokenness? And we have to, as a church and as a culture, create space for it, because left unchecked, it will ruin us. We talked about how Lamentations comes from the first word of the chapter, which means how. It's like saying, how could this be? How could this have happened? What is going on? We beg the question, how can being sad help us? And perhaps the sadness of Lamentations is precisely that God is kind of doing away with our certainty and our privilege, and in the instability, we are invited to become brutally honest. Because when we're honest, we recognize just how overwhelming the loss is, just how great the anxiety is, just how deep the fear is. When we actually get honest, we tell God the truth about how we're feeling. And it's there that we find that even in our darkest moments, that our honest laments become places of worship. And he's big enough to handle that. But what it does for us is it puts us into a place where we acknowledge our own need of God's sustaining presence. And we get to finally collapse all together on Christ. And so we practice giving space for lament around the idea of, God, do you see my plight? Do you see what is going on here? And that's where we started. So today I just want to jump in. We've already read Lamentations 2, and if you recall, they're written as these worship poems, like a reader's theater. There's two voices, the narrator and the person of Jerusalem, and they're meant to be public confessions that will lead us past the questions into a place of joy. But I want to start this morning with, where does lamenting come from? There's really four answers. It comes from our own actions, right? We're all aware of this. I made a decision. That decision led to guilt, led to brokenness, led to sadness. By the way, sometimes when we make a decision, even when we achieve whatever we set out to achieve, that can lead to its own sense of sadness and loss, isn't it? So sometimes it's because we didn't achieve, and sometimes it's because we did. And so our own actions, whether it's something we said or something we did or didn't do, it was us, and it comes from our own actions, and it stings really badly when things fall apart, when we're exposed that we're not enough, that we made the wrong choice. It exposes our own brokenness and selfishness and all of those things, and it stings because we chose it, we caused it. And the consequences of our own sin can be debilitating and leave us haunted, right? In that place of guilt. Sometimes it's not our actions, it's the actions of someone else, others. They did it. They made that choice. They were selfish. They did or didn't do whatever it is that happened. And the ripple effects and waves have repercussions in the world and in people's lives. You can see it from a small relationship all the way up to leaders of countries and businesses. And this is true. They make a decision, it has waves, right? And those waves, sometimes they affect us. And we can be sad. and in despair because someone started that rumor, took that thing, chose to do that. And it stings all the more because we can't do anything about it. It's something they did. And it's easy to get caught up in that one, isn't it? Sometimes no one did it. Right? It's just part of life. Maybe it's we're leaving one stage of life to the next, and so there's a sense of loss to our old self. Maybe there's a sense when you leave childhood, you become an adult, like you're faced with reality and your innocence is gone, and there's no little kids in the room. Santa's not, Santa the way we thought Santa was, and so I don't know what it is, but sometimes no one is to blame. A natural disaster occurs. That storm, that flood, that fire. Tragedy strikes because tragedy happens, and it's how we mourn, because there's no place to direct our energy, is there? There's no one we can get back at. There's nothing we can fix. All we can do is try to clean up and move on. There's a serious loss to that. So sometimes it's us, sometimes it's others, sometimes it's no one, sometimes it's God. Because there's this other sound coming from Lamentations chapter 2. It comes out with brokenness, and it says that God is the one behind it. Now, I can't confirm or deny God's actions in the world, even as a pastor. There's a mystery to it, right? But the writers of Lamentations see God as the mover behind everything, and they're asking questions as if they are in a direct relationship. What's your involvement in all of this? Now, we do the same thing. We just somehow feel ashamed for doing it publicly. Like it's taboo to say, God, why did you do this? Now, in our honest prayers, when we're trying to go to sleep at night and tears are rolling up and we're frustrated, it's very real. God did this to me, and he allowed this, and the writers of Lamentations are picking up on that. You picking up what I'm putting down? See, laments, they have to come out because they come from deep places in our souls that recognize our own fragility. We don't like to come face to face with that, do we? Our inability to actually deal with situations, our need for others, and our need for God. Laments create a space for us to spit up all of the emotions tied with this and get the questions out. And by the way, all of it is necessary. I would say that there are times that we need to simply hear how absurd pain really is. I have a story, and if we have time, I'm going to come back to it. Sometimes we try to hold it all in because of what other people are going to think about us, right? So I don't let myself lament, because if I come out with the truth about how I'm feeling, if I come out with the truth that I might not be enough, and that I'm frustrated with this, and I'm really sad about that, and this thing that happened to me should have never happened, and that thing that happened in the world is not supposed to be that way, it makes us seem weak. We don't want to be seen as weak because our culture doesn't value that. You see, we have this comparison issue where I think it forces us to keep stuff in rather than actually dealing with it. But what if we actually need sadness to move forward? I know that sounds funny, but what if we do? We actually need sadness to lead us forward. What if we need to express these laments, or we would be trapped? Actually, I think Hollywood has tapped into this perfectly. And if you haven't seen the movie Inside Out by the master storytellers from Pixar, here's a clip from the movie Inside Out. And to preface it, the movie is about a little girl named Riley who has moved from Minnesota to San Francisco because of her parents' job. And the movie, by and large, takes place with these characters who are the different emotional states inside her own brain. There's joy, anger, disgust, fear, and sadness. And so these characters are taking different roles and controls, and Riley has been dominated. Everybody has a dominant disposition. Riley has been dominated by joy. And all of a sudden, her world is crumbling because of this move. And the characters are fighting for how to solve the problem. Roll the clip.
Wait, John, you could get lost in there.
Think positive.
Okay, I'm positive you will get lost in there. That's long-term memory. Endless warren of corners and shelves. I read about it in the manuals.
The manuals? The manuals! You read the manuals!
Yeah.
So you know the way back to headquarters.
Yes.
You are my map. Let's go. Lead on, my map. Show me where we're going.
Okay, only I'm too sad to walk. Just give me a few hours. Oh,
Which way? Left?
right. No, I mean go left. I said left was right, like correct.
Okay.
This actually feels kind of nice.
Okay, here we go. We'll be back to headquarters before morning. We can do it. This'll be easy. This is working.
So, as the clip continues, sadness starts touching all the little orbs represent memories. And she starts touching, and so the whole bottom row of long-term memories is now just blue with sadness. And there's this fight about these core memories that create identity pillars. And they're all joyful memories. But when sadness starts touching them, they turn blue and they become sad memories. And the islands that make up those parts of the brain begin crumbling and collapsing. The characters inside Riley's head are asking the question we all do. Why is this happening to me? Now, scientifically, we all do this. We all ask why, even though it's a terrible, terrible question because it always leaves us wanting, right? Because we're wired a certain way, when things are unstable, we often get into fight or flight mode. You've been there before. This is going south. I either need to fight for it or run away. And ultimately, Riley chooses to run away from home because there wasn't created space for her to bring to the surface what she was dealing with her loss. And so we have these default modes of dealing with brokenness. We run away from issues, or we get angry at issues. And if last week we started the stages of grief with denial, anybody know the second stage? It's anger. Why is this happening? We're expressing something. It shouldn't be. So we run away from issues, we get angry at issues, we withdraw or we get sight. Some people put their heads in the sand and don't want to see what's going on in the world because it's not within their world. But at some point, all of us will come face to face with brokenness. And I want to reassure you, if you're sitting here today or watching online, it is okay to be angry. It's okay. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to have the feelings that you do over relationship loss, over that issue that haunts you, over that tragedy that happened. But our efforts in trying to figure out and answer the question of why did it happen, they don't ever satisfy. Because even if you can say, they did this, and you can put a face to it, you can't answer why they did this. What made them do that thing? It always leads you wanting. Maybe even if we did it, we know why we did it, but it can't help us make different outcomes. I know why I did that. I wish I didn't do it. Anybody been there? If no one did it, right, and we have no place to direct that energy other than try to clean up and rebuild, it still doesn't answer the question of why did this happen. Now, reflection on it, sometimes we can learn from those places. Sometimes we can expose where we had a problem and we can rebuild and we can fix and we can overcome. But the argument that Lamentations is going to teach us is that doesn't come without the Spirit and presence of God bringing that into our lives. The question of why always leaves us let down. And the reason is there's a promise and then a letdown. Right? That's a whole other series that we're planning into next year about dealing with disappointment and letdown. Okay? Whole other series. But think about it. We have this idea. This person makes this promise to us and they fail to deliver. This person said this and they didn't follow the protocol. And we were the expense of that decision. There's a promise and a letdown. And what happens when you feel like that promise is God? God's always good, but he caused all of this and allowed all of this to happen. We have to express disappointment, frustration, brokenness, or it will define and unravel us. But when we celebrate, this is the kicker, when we celebrate and embrace that we don't have the answers, we actually will be freed from it and start to rob it of its sting. Imagine this. Imagine someone has just died, okay? And we're all sitting around at the house at a meal and no one is talking about it. No one's talking about the hurt and the loss. In that scenario, no one is freed from suffering. They're oppressed by it. But if all of a sudden someone starts up talking about how they miss Johnny, and someone else breaks in with funny stories of things they did together, and someone else starts crying, and someone else starts laughing, then talking about their brokenness in the moment doesn't destroy them, it frees them. And so we may not have answers, but we do need to talk about it. We do need to express it. And that's the point in today's lament. For God to hear us. I want to point out a couple of scriptures to you. The first one is this. In verse 4, there's this picture of God's bow being bent on destruction. He said he bends his bow against his people as though they were his enemy. His strength is used against him to kill the finest youth. His fury is poured out like fire on beautiful Jerusalem. Yes, the Lord has vanquished Israel like an enemy. He has destroyed her palaces and demolished her fortresses. He has brought unending sorrows and tears upon beautiful Jerusalem. See, for the Israelites, the people that are writing this, seeing that God is behind their loss, it's this giant reversal. God's got the bow bent on their destruction, and it's a reversal of the unbent bow. all the way back in Genesis 9, when God put a rainbow in the sky and he made a covenant promise with Noah to say that he would never again destroy his people. Sometimes when we are going through something, it can feel as if God is completely against us. Doesn't make it true, but it can definitely feel that way. And if you have felt like God somehow took that rainbow and turned it upside down and he's against it, let me just say that is an exposure of sin and brokenness in our world. And it is okay that you feel that way, because what it is eliciting the truth that there is sin and brokenness in our world. And this lament is a long recital of God's actions against a city, which make it very clear for these writers that Jerusalem's most dreaded enemy was the Lord. That covenant that was made with Noah, now God's at work causing their destruction. One line later in the poem of Lamentations 2, I'm not going to read it, but one line even says, mothers are eating their young just to stay alive. That's how bad it is, and the God is behind it. The imagery is extreme, and they're blaming God. And at the end of Lamentations 2, there's nothing that takes away the pain. There's nothing that takes away the suffering. There's nothing that takes away the brokenness. When we are going through pain and suffering and brokenness, and we want God to heal us and change us, by the way, that's not a bad thing. But what can often happen is we can reduce God down to an idol and a product. Anybody made plea bargains with God before? God, if you just, I will. If you just do this thing, I will make this promise. What happens is that makes the Almighty into a commodity. He's like a vending machine dispenser. God, you just give me this thing and I'll just put my money in and we'll have a transaction. But a relationship doesn't work based on transactions like that. It works through transformation. And so maybe the point that the writers of Lamentations are making is that you and I get to express all of the frustration that we have, and that God is big enough to hear it. Maybe the point is, as we express it, we create space for God to begin the healing. Because God is not found in the running away from brokenness. God is found in the midst of brokenness. God is found in the embrace of the world. And the beauty of Christianity is that we actually get to embrace the mystery of God's presence. And it is mysterious and wonderful and beautiful. The poetry in this passage goes even deeper. Let's look. Just look at this. Verse 1. How the Lord in his anger has humiliated the daughter Zion. He's thrown down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. He has not remembered his footstool on the day of anger. So the idea of splendor and footstool, these are ideas of God's promises to be present and to make his people a blessing for everyone else, to lift them up. In fact, verse 3, it says, all strength of Israel vanishes beneath his fierce anger. The Lord has withdrawn his protection as the enemy attacks. He consumes the whole land of Israel like a raging fire. Verse 6 says, he has broken down his temple as though it were a mere garden shelter. The temple represented God's manifest presence in the world. And the writers are expressing this idea that when we're going through something that is really sad and full of despair and brokenness, doesn't it sometimes feel as though God has forgotten about us? Maybe the point is that, like Mick Jagger, I can't get no satisfaction. Maybe the point is that no matter who is behind the brokenness, it hurts. It hurts. And sometimes it hurts to the point where there are no words left. Look at verse 10. It says, the leaders of beautiful Jerusalem sit on the ground in silence. There's a song called Car Radio by the band 21 Pilots. And it's a song about how someone stole his car radio. And now he just sits in silence. But he can't handle the silence because it's making him actually have to think and face all of the brokenness and all of the frustration in his life. And it's louder than any song has ever been. We can't run from it. We can't drown the sorrows enough. We have to turn and face them. And so the writers of this lament are saying, as real and raw as all of the emotions and sadness and brokenness and things that we face, here's what we get to do. We get to cry out. Look at verse 11. I have cried until the tears no longer come. My heart is broken. My spirit is poured out in agony as I see the desperate plight of my people. Verse 18. Cry aloud. In Hebrew, it gets translated, their heart cried. It's not just they voiced it. Everything was weeping from within. Have you been to that point where you've cried so much there are no more tears? It's like tear dry heaps. There's nothing left. And so your heart, that's the way it is saying, cry aloud before the Lord. Let your tears flow like a river day and night. Give yourself no rest. Give your eyes no relief. Verse 19. Rise during the night and cry out. Pour out your hearts like water to the Lord. Lift your hands to him in prayer. We are supposed to cry out. We're supposed to create space. Jesus tells this story. It's a parable in Luke 18 about this widow who goes to this unjust judge. And she knocks on his door day and night because she wants justice. And this judge doesn't care about people or God. That's what the parable says. And she keeps knocking on the door. And she wants justice, and he doesn't care. And he doesn't give in to anyone. He doesn't fear God. He doesn't fear people. But this little old lady keeps knocking on his door. And finally he says, well, she's not going to stop, so I'm going to give her what she wants. And he renders a verdict in her favor because of her persistency knocking on the door. And Jesus says, learn a lesson from the unjust judge. Even he rendered a just decision in the end. So don't you think God will surely give justice to his chosen people who cry out to him day and night? So what are you and I crying out for? What are we crying out for? The poet in Lamentations regards Jerusalem having the temple there. He regards that being the very center of the universe. And so when the city fell, when the city collapsed, when the people got taken into exile, when they were run over by another country, it signaled an unprecedented collapse of order. And the poet compares the loss of Jerusalem, it was so deep, to the depths of the sea, the vastness of the ocean. And in the ancient world, the ocean also represented pure chaos, which is why you always see sea monsters in the pictures of the ocean. That's where creatures of the unknown are. That's the abyss. That's chaos. So there's this final question, and we're going to pull it from verse 13. It's the question, who can heal you? Who can heal you? And it's a rhetorical question because The idea is that there's only one who can heal our chaos. There's only one who can restore our brokenness. It's the Lord. Verse 13 says, "What can I say about you? Who has ever seen such sorrow? How can I comfort you? To what can I compare your anguish? And then, your wounds are as deep as the sea. Who can heal you?" You and I, with no rest, without ceasing, are going to make personal our pain, our sadness. God can handle the plight, the tragedy, and the brokenness, and all of our colorful language about it. And when we make it personal and we express it, it's as if God says this, because he said it in Isaiah chapter 40. He said, why do you guys say that your ways are hidden from me? Why would you say that? I see it all. It's from Isaiah 40, by the way, verse 27. So you and I are going to let it all hang out. We're going to let it all hang out. We're going to put it all on the line because even God should be moved. That's the rhetorical question. Are you not moved? If the writers of Lamentations see God as behind it, they also see God as the only hope they have for healing. And too often, our way of handling difficult circumstances in the church and society is to sugarcoat the realities, to gloss over the awful events with polite language and euphemisms, and to refuse to say directly what has happened. The tendency to be less than forthright in dealing with terrible events, honesty with ourselves and the world, right? It carries over into our prayer life, which is why when most of us pray, we come with, "Oh, dear Lord, how good things are. We love you." We have this cursory prayer. It's why when people ask you, "How you doing?" "I'm fine. I'm good." This carries over. And so what you and I are going to do, we're not going to address God politely with the proper decorum. We're going to let it all hang out because Lamentations teaches us to put it all on the line, to be fully honest with ourselves and with each other and with God. We're going to claim that our pain is useless and it's absurd and it doesn't make sense. And we're not going to stop short. We're going to put it all on the line. We're going to identify what's wrong. And then the fact that it's beyond our capacity to heal it and make it right. And it's in that moment where the God of the universe is going to hear every cry we put out there. I want to invite the band to come and play for a moment. And you may have realized that you guys have pieces of paper. And the pieces of paper we started last week. And we wrote down some laments. And we brought it to this gangly, messed up hodgepodge of a wailing wall. And when I say we're going to create space to name our brokenness and put it all on the line, sometimes we need to start being real with our pain, with our sadness, with our brokenness. I'm not guaranteeing that by naming it, everything in your life is going to be made right. But I want you to hear the words of Jesus the Christ. If the unjust judge would give a just verdict to a persistent widow, how much more would the God of the universe, who hears your cry, come to you? Come to you. And so I want you to write down your prayer. I want you to lay it all out on the line. I want you to identify what's wrong. Don't stop short. Identify what's wrong in your own life. Identify what sins are ailing you. What is keeping you back. Identify what's wrong out there. And begin to cry out about it. And put it at the feet or the door or with the person who is going to hear your cry. So as the band sings, would you take a moment to write something down? Claim it. Put it on the wall.
Standing here in your presence, in a grace so relentless, I am won by perfect love, wrapped within the arms of heaven, in a peace that lasts forever, sinking deep in mercy. See, I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and all my heart is yours. All fear removed, I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Know your love. When I'm lost, you pursue me. Lift my head to see your glory, Lord of all. So beautiful. Here in you I find shelter, captivated by the splendor of your face. My secret place, I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and all my heart is yours. And all fear removed, I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Know your love. Your love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I seek. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, hear my only cry, to know you all alive. Your love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I seek. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, hear my lonely cry, to know you all alive. I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and all my heart is yours. And all fear removed, I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Know your love.
You know, this week I had coffee with someone who was telling me that just this week they lost someone who was incredibly important to them. And as the story went, essentially, They had a complication during their pregnancy. At 28 weeks, they were placed on complete bed rest, and their neighbor, who they didn't know, took an interest, organized all kinds of meals, and took her to doctor's appointments, and basically did everything, got her kids to ball games and school and haircuts and everything that needed to happen from 28 weeks to 37 weeks. Every possible thing was taken care of by a neighbor who they didn't know before. And then, after they delivered a baby, the neighbor unexpectedly died. I just was in their house for a day and a half before anybody found her. How do you explain that? I don't know. Sometimes we lament things that we did, right? Sometimes we lament things that others did. Sometimes we lament things that no one did. And sometimes we say, God, how can this be? It's not right. And in that confession, in our honesty, we're also declaring of what should be right. And it's a prayer that declares the mercy and love of God, because we would not know what should be right had we not had God presently pushing us towards a better us, a better world, full of more hope and more love and more compassion. And it's the presence of Jesus the Christ giving us grace in those moments that stirs our hearts. I don't know what you needed to lament today. Our wall is going to stay up, and we're going to find some other creative outlets over these next few weeks, because week 3 is kind of a turning point. So if you need healing or hope, that's where we get to start hearing it. It's next week. It's a linchpin moment. And if you know someone who needs healing and hope, next week is a week where they don't want to miss. But that doesn't mean you don't get it today. Because when you cry out, the God of the universe hears it. Hears it. Every prayer up on the wall, every cry from our heart, heard. Heavenly Father, around this room, hearts have been moved. And last week, we asked for you to see our plight. And you see. And this week we say, hear our cry. And you hear. Because you are the God who sees, hears, and does not ignore. Thank you for giving us space to express all of our frustration, even if it's directed at you. And thank you that somewhere in this mess, you are present. And like the movie showing us, God, may you help us traverse the sadness so that on the other side, we may be restored and whole. Who can heal but you? May you meet each and every prayer here this morning, because you are that God. And may we be persistent in letting it all hang out. Amen. Amen. Really quick thing before you go. 1, in the movie, Joy, the character who's trying to hoard all the core memories from sadness, finally realizes that when sadness gets a hold of the core memory, it creates this hybrid core memory of both sadness and joy. And Riley, the little girl, she makes it back home and her identity is restored. And this is the picture of when you and I lament, we're creating space for God's restoration. I also, it was brought to my attention last week, I brought up something about a camp housing immigrant children in South Texas. And I'm happy to report that one of our parishioners, Brother Larry, did some research, and he found out some things that are really cool about who's pouring into them and taking care of them. And so if I made it sound like they were not being taken care of at all, that's not my intention. My intention was that my heart breaks over the idea that kids are separated from parents and alone. And so no matter where you are today, may your cry be heard. And may you, Wayfinders, know that you are not alone. So as you leave today, may you know that you are a part of a God who sees, who hears, and does not ignore. Much love, my friends. Go in peace and have a great, great week.
Okay, head.
Camera or the tablet?
Tablet. Boom.
Well, I think the camera thing, this is what's been a headache most of the time.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah.
I think it's our Wi-Fi system. It doesn't like the spottiness.
It might be, you know, because it's built for the school. It might just be that I bet that router is all the way in the office. And then us being, oh, you think
there.
that?
It's what?
They have firewalls in it, and it messes with us all the time. So we started connecting it to this.
It still messes with
But
it.
this thing's spotty enough in this building that
Yeah.
it's finicky.
I wonder.
All
let's
around.
Let's ask Karen if can you tell if we're on a 2G or a 5G signal?
Let's see.
Because if we're on a 2G, let's see. I bet there's a
The
5G
district
available.
Wi-Fi is the 5G.
It is
District
5G?
and Hayes Guest are both 5Gs.
Well,
But this thing won't connect. This will connect to the district, but this will not. We have tried, and it
Yeah,
just
the
won't.
camera doesn't connect. This part will.
how
It's-
can we reprogram the camera?
There.
Somebody needs to try to figure that thing out. If you
We
want
would
the
need
job.
to mess into the wiring of that, and that would probably just
There's a
break it.
458-page manual for that thing. That we
Oh.
found online.
Oh, yeah, I don't want that responsibility.
I was trying to figure out what the color
I
meant
could
when it turned
take
green.
it. I
Yeah,
could
I
take
mean,
it
I-
And I
home.
looked it up and I found a 458
Yeah.
page.
Hey, before we juggle that sounds expensive if it's got a
Yeah. I can take
that thing was
that.
like $350.
I can take that home and try and figure that out. Maybe
Right.
give me the link and give me
Man,
like
it is
a
hot
week.
too.